welcome to the Frontend Coffee Break, the podcast where we take a break and listen to our own voices. Chucho, do you listen to your podcast after you publish them?
Not right after I publish them, but I listen to them from time to time.
But do you listen to you or do you listen to me?
To both.
Okay,
both.
okay. All right. So we're here. We're back. It's hot in Barcelona. It's summer.
It is.
But
Oh
AC,
my God.
AC is fine. Okay, so we bring to you a topic about how we front-enders or the web developers in general, we like to overcomplicate, over-engineer, and make our lives harder. But I think we have to go back. We have to go back a little bit. We are all devs, and we have to go back to the beginning where we started coding, how easy and joyful it was to ship code compared to now. And let me start just a quick introduction. Then you jump in, Chucho, and you tell me your experiences. But I remember when I started my first job, I was doing, mostly full stack, PHP, front end. And the deployment process, it was just opening a SFTP server in my, what was it, FileZilla? I don't know what tool it was. Just dropping the files in and refreshing the page, and you would have it live in production. Right? Or there was a typo or something, just push it again, done. And that was easy. There was no, nothing else. You would change PHP files or CSS files or JavaScript files, upload, done. How was it for you at the beginning?
Well, I do remember that part when you had to figure out where in the file system you had to put the files in order for them to work. I think that the first hurdle one of the first hurdles that you had to jump over was to figure out precisely this, because you put the files in a relative or absolute way, and you needed to figure this out. Anyhow, yeah, it was pretty much like that. I do remember the times that I had the FTP. It was like a common app that I had on the computer, an FTP app. I don't remember right now the name, but I know that I really liked. I found one. What was it? Hamster? No, I don't remember, but it was super nice, and I was super happy using it. Once you got used to it, it was like that. There you go, and you've deployed to production.
Yeah, and back then we didn't even have different environments. I think by the end of my first job, we maybe had 2 environments for doing some sort of testing, but the beginning was just one environment because the websites were so small, and the usage or the concurrent users was like a number was so small. It was like a small websites that didn't nobody really cared about having a staging or UAT or development environment. It's just do it on your machine. When it looks okay, just push it, done.
Yeah, and remember the way that working with CSS back then. When I started working with CSS, we had 3 files. One file that the ones that you called, and you included all 3 other files that you have everything separate, and that's it. And
3
if you have
files.
to go
That's
to work,
already a
yes.
lot, man. 3 files is a lot. I remember having maybe 1.
Because we had separation of concerns. We had a file for colors, a file for layouts, and a general file.
So advanced. So advanced. No, that came from me way later. I remember big CSS files with everything in it, all the components, all the media queries, everything. And just, if you wanted to force reload, you just go to HTML, change the version name in the actual link tag, and you're done. Yeah. I don't know what happened later that developers started saying, this is too easy. We need to make it harder.
Well, for me, I think that I sort of, when jQuery came by and we started working with that, I was more or less at the same time that I had leaning more towards front end. I was doing full stack, and at that time, I started to lean more on front end, and I was happy because we were working with builds, with backend builds at that point, and they had introduced Spring, and they had introduced other stuff that was making for me things a little bit too complicated, all the compilation, all these kind of things. And I thought to myself, oh, it's very nice to work as a front end because I just have to choose the files that I want. I put them where I want. I have full control of what I want, and I don't have to worry about this magic, which just do stuff and you don't know exactly what's happening. But also, I have to admit that it was because I wanted to have full control of where things where how they worked. And with these builds, I felt that I didn't. And it was more or less at the same time that I started like, yeah, I mean, front end is more my thing. I mean, kept on doing full stack for a long time, but I think that was breaking, not a breaking point, but it was a turning point.
Maybe that time where the websites were basically HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript. We didn't have this full-fledged JavaScript application. It was more like, let's sprinkle some jQuery, and then you would drop the jQuery, even maybe host it from Google CDN or whatever on the bottom of the page, and then your own just one file, a script tag, and then do something with it, just some enhancements. And that was nice. No bundling, no nothing. I think the first things that I played with regards of builds and bundling was for SAS, right? For SCSS or SAS, where this came out and oh my God, you can nest, you can use like variables, all the mechanisms are powerful. So I think maybe SAS was the first thing that started like to complicate the shipping process for my front end.
I don't remember when I started working with SAS, to be honest. But I think that when I started looking into builds, I didn't even use anything related to more of the classic front ends like builds like Grunt or Gob.
No. I mean, same here. I mean, I was using like a desktop Mac app to actually compile. Just, I mean, we were just dropping the CSS, but on your repository locally, you would have the SCSS or the less. Actually, it was less. You would drop this into your Mac app that would compile this. No terminal. We're not that advanced, and then you would just ship the CSS minified file, right?
Okay. So you were working
no
locally
pipelines.
with
It's just
this.
Locally
Okay.
we would build the thing, and then when you ship it, because shipping meant uploading to the server with via FTP, then you would ship the minified version. Yeah.
Well, interesting. I mean, as I said, I don't remember when I did the jump between not using it and using it. It has been quite a bit of a while. But before joining Netcentric, definitely I was already working with this.
Sure. No, I'm talking about 15 or 20 years ago. So yeah.
But yeah, suddenly I think that this is precisely as I said, jQuery appeared, SAS appeared, and new ways to work with the front end, new ways to make the front end more complex appeared. And with that, when you have a tool that allows you to do more complex things, people start doing more complex things. And I think this is just a snowball that starts growing. So JavaScript takes a bigger role. I mean, dynamic pages take a bigger role. More complex styles take a bigger role. And suddenly when originally you had a very simple CSS, very simple JavaScript, you end up with a lot of JavaScript, a lot of CSS, very complex structure of files that you need to somehow organize. And I think that this is when builds started coming along. It's like, well, yeah, I know that I can add in one file and import and do this and put this here and copy paste, or maybe do a process that through a batch file or something, create a pipeline that grabs all that JavaScripts and this. I remember there's that adds just one after the other and puts them in one big JavaScript file, and that's your JavaScript file. That's the build that you had, and you started creating this complex systems, or you started to have the need of creating these complex systems that I think pushed these new ways of working forward, and we ended up with having very, very, very complex things for very simple stuff.
Yeah. I think the first one for me was Grunt, and you felt so smart. Oh, you're doing like a Grunt file with your different tasks. Maybe just moving assets, moving this thing to the dist folder, compiling that, and building the SAS. Oh my God, it's so magical. Turns out it was like just like, I don't know, so easy and so nonsensical. But yeah, definitely Node, like npm, the whole thing. Webpack came out, and it's and now like you cannot have a project without the build system, like the front end build system.
You can.
Well, I mean, sure, if it's a side project where you just simply use nah, come on. Show me a production project, a big web application or a big marketing website that does not use any sort of build system.
Ours.
Tell me more.
The Cognizant-centric website does not use a build system.
Okay, but are you making the best use of SAS?
We're not using SAS.
Oh, you're not using SAS. Okay. Are you
okay.
using, I don't know, transpilers for making compatibility in JavaScript?
Nothing.
Oh, no. Okay, you're only ship for
Nothing.
latest browsers. Okay, got it. No
Well,
TypeScript. Okay.
no,
Okay.
TypeScript, no, nothing. Before this, I have to say that I was thinking about what you said, and I just did a quick search. What I used, I think the first built thing that I started using is Ant, Apache Ant,
Oh,
which
wow.
allowed
Okay.
you to build things however you wanted. It was a bit of a configuration file, if I'm not mistaken, and you added the files that you needed to batch to build together and things like that, and it handled everything. So that's how I started with. I don't remember the details, but I do remember using that as we have Ant, and that's what we're gonna use.
Wasn't that more like
front
for backenders and like maybe XML files or like?
No, remember it's a build system, some sort of. If I remember correctly, it's been almost 20 years.
Oh my God.
A little bit less that I used that, but it is a way to build something, and it was the way that I used to build the front end. Now going back to, yes, it is true that every single project practically seems, well, I would say that if you go to any company in a new project, you'll find that 99.99% of them most likely have some sort of build system. But for example, we've talked in the past about this EDS, Edge Delivery Service. The idea behind EDS is precisely to leverage the most modern things that you can do with JavaScript and CSS. So it really doesn't rely on a build system. It just serves things as is. So you create your JavaScript files however you want, as long as it's not something that you need to transpile or compile. You put your JavaScript files, it will be loaded as is. You do the same thing that you do with CSS. And with CSS, remember, there's already nesting now in CSS. And yeah, depending on what you want to support, you would need to manually do the transpilation regarding on, for example, as you mentioned, like to support certain browsers. But I think that most of the modern web browsers already support most of the things that you're really going to use.
That's true. I mean, you could aim for just modern browsers, but still, I think you'd still want maybe minification. Okay, maybe not on the build system. You could do it in a CDN level, and then let the CDN minify CSS, minify JavaScript, maybe.
But really, I mean, the amount of CSS, amount of JavaScript, we do get, for example, in Lighthouse, sometimes when you see the scores, like, oh, well, maybe you should minify JavaScript, and still we get a score of 99 or 100. Because it's really fast. It is just.
But it's not just about the score. No? It's also at how much weight is the
because
page.
It's really. But remember, when even if you're not minifying, obfuscating, let's say the JavaScript or the CSS, you had to leave a lot of spaces. You do compress. You do a gzip or something like that in the server, and if you can have 1,000 or 1 million spaces in the file, they're going to be compressed to nothing because they're continuous. So. Yeah, minification, at one point it was used to obfuscate the JavaScript, and then again it was also used to make it smaller. But nowadays I really don't think that it's completely necessary. And if you're building, if you're loading only because we're loading only the modules that we need, and if we need a module, we just import it, and the browser knows that it needs to load that module. So it's pretty efficient. Of course, you need to be careful of how you do it, but it's quite nice.
Yeah, I think we'll have to agree to disagree. I think
okay.
You always need to minify. You always need to make your the effort, like let's say on the server side, to not have to ship more code than necessary. Think about mobile connection. Think about like third world countries, whatever, and then I mean. Yeah, I guess also it's not black and white. I mean, there's also like how big is the file you said before. Maybe for smaller files, already with gzip or whatever broadly, whatever compression is already like you will not feel any difference. For big code bases, maybe you do. But yeah, okay.
Just to finish this part, I think that nowadays with modern browsers and modern technologies, you can skip you can go back to not having a build system. Depending on the infrastructure that you use, but you can go back to not use the build system and still be efficient.
Okay, but then
minification.
you skip the whole history. We went from, great, this is PHP, this is lovely, and to, okay, this is great, now it's JavaScript on the browser. So where, in the middle part, where did we go wrong? What's the middle part of
No,
the
it's
story?
not that you go wrong. I think personally, I don't think that it's something that you go wrong. But when you have a lack of tools or a lack of technology, you compensate somehow. For example, we didn't have fast connections before, so you compensated making sure that you didn't use more resources than you needed. And eventually you get to the point of, like with programming languages, um, they were really efficient back then, because they didn't really, computers didn't have that many resources, and you were really careful about how you programmed it. And eventually you created techniques to make sure that you can minify, techniques that you can do, make sure that you use the least amount of memory. But eventually you get to a point that technology has grown so much that you don't need that. You might still use it, but you really don't really need it. So you can just skip all those best practices that you had before because they're no longer necessary. And I think that in this case, it's more or less the same. Technology has grown quite a bit, and things that we did, best practices that we had in the past, are no longer necessary. I'm not saying that best practices, you should avoid best practices. What I'm saying is that some of the things are slowly becoming obsolete, slowly becoming unnecessary because there's new ways of doing stuff. Eventually, the technology has grown to fit the need that was created, and now we can just avoid things. Like for example, SAS eventually, I think that SAS potentially might disappear.
True. I mean, I definitely like where we're going, where, okay, you have now CSS properties and the nesting, and every time, sure, now you will be able to ship more and more JavaScript. They're also thinking about even shipping TypeScript directly to the browsers. So if you like that, go for it. That I like. What I didn't like was before, a few, maybe more 2 or 3 years, I don't know, 5 years, where there was this war on
Okay.
frameworks, or, I mean, you were there, you lived it through it. I mean, and you
Yes.
survived, where you maybe started learning Angular. And then a few months later, they said, "Oh, React is the new cool thing," and then you went to React, and then you went back to Angular 2, and then and people had to,
Backbone.
whatever, sure, first Backbone, right? So you had to relearn, like, how to use these things. Okay, you knew JavaScript, but you actually had to learn how to use hooks and the MDC module, whatever it is that the different frameworks were built upon. So it was horrible. Like, again, if you didn't have React Angular, you only are whatever, Svelte expert. It's, I don't know how to express it, but it felt like it was too much, right? And now it feels like all these frameworks are more stable. There's less like breaking changes, and it's like, okay, there's not as much things going out like so rapidly. It's much more plateaued, maybe even, like, How do you feel about it?
Still, I mean, technology has been maturing
Okay.
for the time, and a lot of these frameworks they appeared, and then they started growing and started gaining popularity and became super complex.
Yes.
And as you said, I remember that I started learning Angular before joining Netcentric because that was the thing that was happening there. I even recommended in the company that I left to use Angular because it seemed the right thing to use. And then eventually they took a Angular course, and the teacher said, "Oh no, you should learn React," which I disagree.
No.
Because what they needed was actually what Angular was giving at that moment. We came to Netcentric, and suddenly, it's Backbone. It's like, okay, so no React, no Angular, it's Backbone.
From
And I
Angular to
remember that
Backbone, that's interesting. Okay.
we invested so much in Backbone. We had one of our academies. The first academy was with Backbone. I remember that. Yeah. I gave the Backbone workshop, and eventually, 1 year or 2 years later, we stopped using Backbone altogether. It's like,
gone.
no, this is the thing of it's completely gone, and it is completely crazy. How, as you say, a lot of frameworks were just appearing, becoming more complex. Version 1, version 2, blah 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 blah, and eventually, I do feel that right now the playing field, it seems to be more quiet, more stable. We are not hearing about this new thing here and there. So I have to agree, but it is because of the I guess they reach a certain maturity level that they are not longer need to grow like that.
Thankfully, and it's funny that it was all our own doing, like the front-end community or the developers community that we shoot ourselves. Like we said, okay, we have this Angular, but I don't like Angular. Let me get React. And then Evan Yu comes in and says, yeah, I don't like this framework. Let me do Svelte. And then Richard Harris says, no, I don't like this. Let me do Svelte, Vue, Svelte. I confusing names, but yeah, it's maybe because you're gonna just sell it to a client again. You refactor the whole code base from scratch, new technology. Who knows?
I have to disagree on one thing. I don't think it's the front ends that complicated things. I think it's the back ends that wanted to become front ends, that we wanted to work as a back end in a front end environment, and they invented and they created all this stuff.
Okay, that could be TypeScript, right? TypeScript maybe because they wanted typings, but
No, but I think that a lot of now seriously speaking, I do think that a lot of decisions regarding frameworks and stuff is based on people that just didn't like the way that frontend was done, and they said, "Oh, it should be like backend," and they imposed themselves this way. Backbone being one of them.
yeah, but then like you have big companies like sponsoring these things, like Google for Angular, React, Facebook, and then of course you go to a client and they say, hey, but if Facebook is using it, Facebook is sponsoring the coding for it, why don't we use it? I mean, if it's good for Facebook, it's what's good for us, right? And then you're sometimes forced, and I that time of the development was painful. Like the same with like the whole pipelines thing. I remember again, we go back to FTP, and now we moved, maybe not now, but a few years ago, we moved back to very complex pipelines. Like you have this Jenkins thing and GitLab and all the hooks. Okay, when you do this thing, it triggers to another repo that builds another thing, and it pushes to the CDN to flush the cache here and there. And then you have people like engineers that are solely focused on pipelines, and they just do pipeline like operations or whatever, and they just do pipelines. And it's like, do we really need somebody to take care like 8 hours a day, 40 a week to maintain a pipeline when you simply have to deliver HTMLs to the final client?
It is a bit ironic.
It's just an HTML file, it's a text file. Just upload it and be done with it. But I think we overcomplicate stuff sometimes, and I do see the benefits and some of the things. And I like that now maybe it's easier with GitHub Actions. It's very easy, very straightforward. With JavaScript, you do a small file and then you're done. Maybe build as EDS, as you mentioned. No build whatsoever. I do like that as well. So maybe we're in the right track.
But I think that all these things are supposed to be tools to help us make things simpler.
In theory.
But they can be super complex.
It's ironic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ironic especially because it is something that you might use once every long term. I mean, you don't use it constantly. You just use it once, you set it up, and then you forget about it. And then if you have to do it again, it can be quite painful if things have not changed. But it feels ironic that you need to use or have such a complex workflow to upload HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Yeah.
There's simple files that you can just build in your notepad, save them in a folder, and open them in a browser, and they should work.
Yeah.
So
Webpack, like how many times have I seen a project or a build that's a very complex Webpack setup with plugins and whatever, custom, very like complicated config files, and you don't dare touch it. Like how do you even like upgrade this thing or change it? Like if it works, I'm not gonna touch it. Like this is too complex, right? And then it's our own doing. Yeah.
But in the end, we have this complexity because, and we've said it, building or doing front end is complex. We can do I just remember, for example, when a client asks, hey, can we do this? My answer is always, yes, we can do whatever you want on the browser. The question is, at what cost?
How fast?
Time-wise, yeah. So it's like, oh, I'd like to have something that does this, or that. Can I do it? It's like, yes, you can do it. They can even say, well, I want a video game that is this complex. Can we do it in the browser? Yes, we can do it. But the complexity is going to be bigger than if you were just putting a blog, writing a blog. But the thing is that we can do things that are so complex right now in the front end that these systems are supposed to allow us to be better organized and to basically, give order to something that is quite complex.
Yeah, I just wish that people would stop for a minute, like whatever, clients, stakeholders, consultants, right? And just think sometimes about complexity. We talked in the past in this podcast where we have these complex requirements, components that need to do everything because maybe in the future I will need it. And the same thing for architecture and front-end setups. Let's just not overthink this. Like, I mean, if it's simple, it's better. Sometimes it doesn't. It's okay if your release process has 4 steps instead of 1 because it's automated with 200 files for the automation. Just do the 3 steps, copy and paste whatever you need to do, and you're done. Right? Sometimes it's just more efficient. You ship faster, and what's important is that you ship to production. So yeah.
Well, the next step is either AI does it for you, or you have a more visual way of building pipelines.
AI for sure. Agentic world. Let's live in it. Chucho, anything else from your side?
No. Well, there's one thing that I do want to mention to finish the topic. Well, 2. One of them is that a front-end build system can be as complex as you want it to be, or as simple as you want it to be. Complexity is going to be somewhere there, but you can really create, as you say, you can do a webcam pack with a lot of plugins and stuff, and it can be like super complex. And of course, it can do a lot of very interesting stuff. Or you can build something that is quite simple, or even go on a more modern world where you can potentially be buildless, or use a very simple build just to do the most common tasks, move things around, or whatever. So this is something that we need to take into account when we're using a build system or trying to incorporate the build system in our project. Is, do I really need it? I mean, do I really need all of this? What is it? What I really need? We should ask ourselves that. And the other thing is that, remember, there's a lot of the front end technology is advances quite a bit. There's a lot of different ways to do things now. And if you're going to start a new project, maybe you should ask yourself, is there a more modern, better way to do this that will make it simpler? That's it. How about you?
We agree. In not in the rest of the stuff, no. But today, in this, we agree. And with this agreement, we let it go to the audience, the listeners. How do you feel about the front end landscape right now? Is it complex? Is it easy? Is it getting easier? Let us know. See you in the next Frontend Coffee Break.
See you in the next one. Bye.